Alright, the first big trade of the offseason has happened, and just based on my initial thoughts, I like it for the Rockets, because after this past year, I think they're looking to make a deep run in the playoffs, so they're looking past just another high seeding in the regular. As talented as Jalen is, he really got exposed, because he's uncomfortable against real physicality, and he can't play against the blitz, so once he's forced off the rock, he either can't get it back, or still can't even get a shot off when he does. In the 7 games against the Dubs, he had less than 15 points in 6 of them, with 4 of those in single digit, and he had 15 shots or less in those 6 games, with 3 of those in single digit, and that's without even mentioning the turnover issues he can run into. That's just unacceptable as a player with the rock in their hands a lot of the times, because they're relying on him to either make or create shots, and without that, it really doesn't matter how many stops they get if they're not capitalizing on them. Truthfully, him and Dylan just can't provide the scoring dynamic K does, because when the game slows down in the playoffs, he's a player that just needs the rock in his spots, so they can always find him on post-ups to play out of, and as seen in the Dub series, they obviously needed that. But he can also be another primary rock handler to alleviate pressure off Fred, because he's basically been doing that since his time with the Nets, so I'm interested in seeing how his two-man game with Şengün develops. And as much as he is providing for them offensively, they're providing just as much for him defensively. They've got a lot of length and size in their young core that should allow him to prioritize just getting buckets, because on the Suns, they were very undersized, so he had to play a lot bigger than he probably would have liked, but now he shouldn't have to. They've got real bigs and wings, and he's providing even more length on top of what they already have. So if anything, their defense has gotten better just based on that, especially on the perimeter, because he adds more versatility to their Reds. There's really only a couple of downsides I can think of in this trade, and first is his age, because even though he hasn't had a big drop-off in his level of play, he's obviously closer to the end of his career than his prime, so the championship window is short compared to the window they would have potentially had by keeping Jalen, depending on how he would have developed. Then second is their lack of shooting, because they just don't have consistent players on the spot up, so that could potentially hurt them if the opponent's defensive schemes are tailored towards stopping K. But I think those potential downsides are still better than the ones I see on the Suns, and a lot of it stems from them doubling down on their small ball when that hasn't worked at all. As I've been saying during their tenure with K, their main rotation is way too easy for opponents to exploit offensively, because it's hard to be a good team defensively when the majority of them are under 6'6", and there's just no principles or schemes that can compensate for that innate size disadvantage. That's been their main issue, yet for some reason, the org decides not to address it, and by bringing in more guards, it doesn't even help on the other end, because their best players are at their best with the rock in their hands, so I don't know how that dynamic is going to work when it already didn't work with K as a player that can play off the rock efficiently. Maybe I just can't see what the front office's vision for this team is supposed to be, because from my perspective, the composition continues to look terrible. So unless they use Jalen as a trade piece and somehow make real changes this offseason that'll make him more balanced from top to bottom, the only vision I can see is another wasted year for Book in his prime. Just watch the tape.